The richest man in the world interviews his 5 children to lead LVMH, the luxury empire. Mr. Arnault has simply stated that his successor will be selected on the basis of merit. According to the index, he had $208 billion in assets as of April 19. With the help of senior lieutenants like Sidney Toledano, who oversaw Christian Dior, and Michael Burke, who is in charge of his most well-known brand, Louis Vuitton, Mr. Arnault has managed the business for decades. The 66-year-old Mr. Burke left Louis Vuitton in January to be with his label. Days later, Ms. Arnault, who was getting ready to take over as the company's CEO, went to the Dior fashion show in Paris. She shares her father's refined mannerisms, prominent brow, and tall, lean build, giving her an amazing likeness to him. She went backstage and gave her opinion of the handbags that had just been displayed. She claimed that shiny materials were becoming more popular. She described the collection as really lovely. A little romantic, Mr. Toledano observed as a pleased parent. She survived the Toledano-Michael tandem, he declared. She's been immunized now. The 2 doses have been given to her. Rarely does Mr. Arnault discuss succession in public. According to those close to him, he has been thinking about it for years. According to the sources, in 2003, he paid a hospital visit to Jean-Luc Lagardère, his tennis partner and close friend, who had undergone hip surgery. One of France's most renowned businesspeople, Mr. Lagardère had amassed an empire that encompassed the publisher Hachette and the missile manufacturer Matra. Mr. Lagardère fell into a coma 2 days later as a result of an infection, and he passed away not long after. The 75-year-old executive had not fully planned for his successor. His son Arnault gradually sold off or gave up the things his father had built over the years. Mr. Arnault recently took action to strengthen and pass on his family's control over LVMH. He has enormous authority with a relatively modest ownership. According to France's stock market watchdog, he also established a second company, Agache Commanditaires, which is held by his 5 children with a 20% ownership each. The new organization has the authority to take over Agache's management, thus ending Mr. Arnault's tenure as CEO. Major choices, like dissolving Agache, require his children's unanimous consent. The children will alternately serve as the company's chairman for 2 years, and they will be prohibited from selling their shares for 30 years without the board's unanimous consent. Only Mr. Arnault's direct descendants will be permitted to own the shares once that time has passed. One businessman who has known Mr. Arnault for years compared the predicament to the setting of Jean-Paul Sartre's play No Exit, in which the main characters are sentenced to an eternity of punishment in a room with one other. Given that their father instilled in them the value of putting the needs of the business first from an early age, Mr. Toledano expressed his confidence in the ability of the Arnault children to resolve any conflicts. "They all get along well right now," he remarked. People familiar with the children's relationship claim that they all view one another as siblings rather than as half-brothers or half-sisters. The 5 would never speak or make jokes about who was better at things like tennis or piano since their father wouldn't let it, these people added, adding that they are cautious not to give the appearance of rivalry or conflict. According to Mr. Toledano, Mr. Arnault is above all a pragmatic man. You must decide who is best at a given time while taking the difficulties into account. He does it with his managers and advisors, and I believe he will do it with his kids as well. Mr. Toledano says it's not a given that one of Mr. Arnault's kids will manage LVMH in the future. He claimed that he never said, "I must train my children for my succession," to him. Near the border with Belgium, in Roubaix, Bernard Arnault was born in 1949. His father, Jean Arnault, was a manufacturer and the proprietor of the Ferret-Savenol firm of civil engineers. The École Polytechnique, a highly exclusive engineering and science school that has shaped the elite since the French Revolution, accepted him because of his academic excellence. Polytechnique was transformed by Napoleon Bonaparte into the military academy it is today. A bugle call and the hoisting of the flag would awaken Mr. Arnault and the 312 other students in his class at 7 a.m. He learned to march while donning the bicorn hat from the Napoleonic era that students wore every year as they march in the Bastille Day parade down the Champs-Élysées. In a collection of interviews with a French journalist, Mr. Arnault reflected on how his Polytechnique education laid the groundwork for his success in the fashion industry. He commented, "It is above all a program that gives you a rational mindset, which allows you to analyze a situation or a problem very quickly," and added that LVMH makes a point of hiring young talent from the school. When asked about his father's admiration for the school, Antoine Arnault was more direct. The eldest son recalled how difficult it was to inform his father that he wasn't Polytechnique material in an interview with Le Monde, the details of which were confirmed by a spokeswoman. He and his sister didn't go to the school. For him, only Polytechnique counts, he continued. With his first wife, and de Wavrin, Mr. Arnault had 2 children, Antoine and Delphine. He was a young father who was strict about his kids' schooling. They recall how, in between business meetings, he would summon them to his office where he would drill them on math problems. Early in the 1980s, after François Mitterrand, a leading socialist, was elected president of France and promised to impose high taxes on the wealthy, Mr. Arnault relocated his family to New York. He built the company he had inherited from his father during a 2-year stay in the United States. When Mr. Arnault returned to France in 1984, he took his first step into the luxury industry by acquiring control of the struggling textile manufacturer Boussac Saint Frères. There was a gem hidden inside of it, Christian Dior. The model for Mr. Arnault's expanding enterprise was Dior. With the new look garment, the haute couture label reinvented womenswear in the middle of the 20th century, and Mr. Arnault intended to highlight this fashion pedigree through aggressive development. He hired Delphine, who was in her early 20s, to work for John Galliano's eponymous fashion company. Galliano was a well-known designer and the creative director of Dior. At Dior, Mr. Toledano later took her under his wing. Before making the crucial choice to terminate Mr. Galliano after he was caught on camera spouting anti-Semitic statements, the CEO remembered conferring with Delphine and her father. After getting divorced in 1990, Mr. Arnault went to a friend's residence where he met Canadian concert pianist Helene Mercier. While Mr. Arnault was driving her home, he opened up to her about his difficulties in mastering a set of Frédéric Chopin etudes. She requested that he play Chopin for her when they next connected over tea at Mr. Arnault's house. In her memoirs, she wrote, "He was shaking all over with stage fright but seemed determined to go all the way. I got the impression that Bernard was hurting, that he was hurting himself to move me." After getting married, they had 3 sons. According to family members, Mrs. Mercier Arnault parented with the same passion that helped her become a well-known pianist. She made her boys work hard in both music and school, waking them up early to practice and learn. Also devoting himself to their academics was Mr. Arnault. After a particularly exhausting trip to Asia, Mr. Toledano recalled a flight he took with Mr. Arnault back to Paris. Operating on only a few hours of sleep, Mr. Arnault took up a mathematics textbook and started studying. One of his younger boys was going to sit for the Polytechnique admission exam. He said to Mr. Toledano, "I need to refresh my memory." Alexander Arnault attempted to enroll in undergraduate programs at Polytechnique but was unsuccessful. Later, he was granted admission to the university for a master's program. He rapidly made a name for himself at LVMH as someone who had his father's ear. His father informed him that the family-owned company's owners did not want to sell when he recommended purchasing German luggage manufacturer Rimowa. LVMH officials claim that Alexander wrote the father of the Rimowa family and went to see him. In 2017, LVMH acquired the business, and Mr. Arnault appointed Alexander as CEO. He transformed the brand by forming partnerships with streetwear-savvy designers. On luggage from one set, the Supreme emblem was imprinted. For his off-white company, Virgil Abloh created a clear case for another. Then, Mr. Arnault dispatched Alexander to assist in reshaping Tiffany & Company, which was bought in 2021 for $15.8 billion. The jeweler, which is well known for its engagement rings, has had trouble attracting younger customers. Alexander was the driving force behind the Tiffany and Nike Incorporated partnership that resulted in the $400 Nike Air Force One sneakers all-black leather construction and blue swoosh. All around the United States, advertisements with the slogan "Not Your Mother's Tiffany" could be seen. The actions upset fashion industry professionals who were concerned he was defaming a prominent luxury brand. According to Anna Angelic, a former chief brand officer at Banana Republic, why on earth would Tiffany want to move away from that to become just another streetwear brand is beyond me. The 2 youngest children of Mr. Arnault have followed their father's career path the closest. Both graduated from a Jesuit high school where Brigitte Macron taught literature courses before becoming France's first lady. Tennis prodigy Frédéric Arnault also received classical piano training. At Polytechnique, when he was accepted, he took the same classes as his father. After that, he co-founded an electronic payments firm that he eventually sold after 18 months. Stefan Bianchi, a manager who had raised an heir to the Yves Rocher cosmetics brand, was hired by the senior Mr. Arnault in 2018 to head LVMH's watch division. Mr. Arnault, according to Mr. Bianchi, instructed him from the beginning to collaborate closely with Frederick, who at the time was in charge of Tag Heuer's digital strategy. 2 years later, Mr. Bianchi appointed him as the company's CEO. In an interview, Frederick said, "My father, of course, gives me advice, but he also gives me a lot of freedom." According to Mr. Toledano, he has his father's propensity to listen to people speak during meetings as he studies them. He absorbs you as he looks at you. Sometimes he just listens for 10 minutes of what you have to say, he remarked. People close to them claim that Frederick and his younger brother Jean have a close relationship, which has contributed to the 24-year-old's fascination with the watch industry. Jean studied financial mathematics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Later, he graduated with a master's in mechanical engineering from Imperial College London, where he focused on the carbon balance spring used in Tag Heuer watches for his thesis. He is currently employed by Louis Vuitton's watch division and spends the majority of his time at the company's Swiss factory. With the help of the watchmaker's widow, he revealed plans to revive the Gerald Genta brand in March. In recent years, Mr. Arnault has sought counsel from his kids on some of the trickier matters affecting his business. According to sources close to him, Mr. Arnault was concerned the public wrath would spread toward their family and LVMH as last year's inflation started to bite, increasing public rage over wealth inequality. He went to his eldest son, Antoine, who had reportedly been pressuring him to be more forthcoming with the public on LVMH's operations. According to the persons, Antoine advised that LVMH start an advertising campaign highlighting the amount of taxes the company paid in France last year and the number of jobs it generated. His dad followed the suggestions. With his proposal to raise France's retirement age this year, Mr. Macron sparked sizable street demonstrations. At the protests, pictures of Mr. Arnault started to appear on wanted posters, and protesters barraged the LVMH headquarters lobby with flares and flags. Mr. Arnault started launching his advertising campaign in Liberation and other left-leaning publications in the days that followed. According to people familiar with the situation, the luxury magnate also sought his children for guidance on how to manage Mr. Burke's departure from Louis Vuitton. While overcoming personal tragedy, Mr. Burke, who is still Mr. Arnault's advisor, grew Louis Vuitton into a company with $20 billion in annual sales. Around the same time Mr. Burke's wife, Bridget, was given a cancer diagnosis, the company's creative director for menswear, Virgil Abloh, was also given the same news. In the months before Virgil Abloh passed away in November 2021, Bridget Burke and Mr. Abloh became close over their shared experience. The fashion industry credited the designer with setting trends. Bridget has a reputation for hosting team dinners. She prepared the meals. "I served," Mr. Burke claimed. Before his wife passed away in February, Mr. Burke had to be by her side. Pietro Beccari, CEO of Dior, would take over at Louis Vuitton, Mr. Arnault determined. The new CEO of Dior would be Delphine Arnault. In late January, Louis Vuitton staff members met at the Louvre for a special memorial service for Mr. Burke. The brand had recently finished its menswear show there. According to others there, Delphine Arnault said to the gathering, "I'm very touched to be here," as her father and Mr. Burke watched. She recalled that Mr. Burke's mustache was one of her earliest memories. She presented them with a picture of Mr. Burke as a young man from the 1980s and said, "We've all learned so much by your side."